So do you get nervous when you have to talk to your boss or anyone who has authority over you? I mean, most of us do, right? I mean, at least a little bit. But can you guess what's even more nerve-wracking than that? Having your boss talk to someone you introduced them to or that you've introduced information to. In other words, the only thing that's more scary than talking to your boss is having a salesperson talk to your boss. It's no wonder then that so many of the sellers and managers that I talk with on the daily basis are struggling with getting their champions to introduce them to their boss, or even harder still, going directly to their boss to get the meeting. Because if you do the latter as a seller and you try to go around your contact, then there's that fear of ticking off your champion. But you know that if you don't get the decision maker involved, the odds that you're going to get the deal are slim to none, right? In one survey by B2B Decision Labs, they found that 83% of sales leaders agreed getting executives, decision makers involved is critical to getting the deal done. But 52% of them said their teams just aren't good at working with internal sponsors. Why is that? So what's the best way to get through these doors without ticking off your champion or sponsor or alienating that executive buyer that you want to connect with? What's getting in the way of actually doing what we know we should? Where's the fear really coming from? I have an idea. You might have an idea as well, but I dug into the research around this. What is the best messaging to use? How do you get to the meeting with the decision maker while still remaining buyer first focused?
So let's start with why this happens. Why is it so hard for us to ask for access to decision makers? On a recent coaching call, when a client realized that she didn't actually have access to the decision maker, she was still resistant to even asking about them, never mind asking for access to them. When I asked her where in the process that the executive decision maker usually gets involved for something like this in the company, she didn't know. Then I asked her, does her champion believe that this is the solution that's going to solve the problem? And is it compelling? She's like, well, of course, he desperately wants to implement this. He just can't seem to get his boss sold on the idea. I think it's because he keeps talking about the tools and his boss just doesn't care. And she's right. His boss probably doesn't care. So even though she knew what was happening and she knew what she needed to do, she couldn't seem to make herself even ask the question to do it. So why does this happen? Data from Objective Management Group shows that when sellers are struggling with the need for approval, and 60% of the 2.2 million sellers that have been surveyed, sellers and leaders struggle with the need for approval. It's human, right? But it impacts our ability not only to get access to decision makers, it also has a major impact on the ability to qualify, to be consultative, to sell on value and negotiate, just to name a few. But here's the kicker. The better you are with being consultative and qualifying and selling on value, the easier it is to actually get access to the decision makers. The hardest part of all of this is that overcoming a need for approval can take, well, a long time. Even with coaching, it can take as much as 9 to 12 months for us to be able to fully understand it and develop the strategies in order to manage it. This is why I often tell sellers, leaders, and business owners that they want to probably work with a licensed therapist and on their own self-acceptance that's going to accelerate their sales performance improvement. See, when you fully accept who it is that you are, you're not going to seek the validation from others as much. I know it seems a little fluffy. I used to think so too. But this inner work has to be done to ensure that we do the things that we know that we should do, like my client, and are able to do. But what about the skill set? What if you're not sure about what to do? What do we need to do in order to earn the right to get to that decision maker? Now, what I see missing in a lot of sales conversations, and I hear a lot of them, is asking about the buyer's buying process. What I hear happening is that when sellers have their initial calls with champions and sponsors, they think they've uncovered a problem that they can solve. They get excited and they jump into demos and the next steps without ever actually stopping to ask some simple questions like, when do you need to see these results by? When do you need to see the results by? Not when do I want to have this solution implemented by? Two different things. What's the significance of that particular deadline of when you need to see those results? Who else gets impacted by this? And how much time is it that you've budgeted for implementing this? Those sequential questions then also can be asked to ask about their process. So tell me about the process that you have to go through to implement a solution like this. Like, how long does it typically take? Who gets involved and at what point? And what do those people need in order to make their decision? What's important to them? See, when you have clear expectations on their process and when they need to get a decision maker involved and what those decision makers need along the timeline and why it's important, then there's no need to feel uncomfortable for when it's time for you to ask for the access to the decision makers, because it's the next established step that you collaborated with together. You know when it's going to be appropriate to do so and why and what's going to be important, which gives you time to work on with your client, with your buyer, like I do with my coaching clients, about what to say, collaborating with your champion about what to ask for in that meeting to get the meeting to happen. Now, to look into this, how do we get executives to take the meeting? I came across some research from B2B Decision Labs on this. There's some links included in it in the descriptions below and in the comments. And the thing that intrigued me but is it really did align with what I was actually seeing happening in the field with my clients and with all of their buyers. So here's my top 3 takeaways from it. The study first tested 4 types of messaging on executive. First, they tested a unique product value proposition. We hear these a lot. This is where the seller shares how their solution helps to solve the problem in a new and a different, better way than the competitor does. Turns out, this didn't actually appear to impact whether or not executives would agree to take the meeting in a direct way, as they were equally as likely to accept or decline the meeting. Now, one of the things that we should note here is that there's the direct way to get the meeting and there's the way to get through the sponsor. In this particular study, the direct way didn't seem to make a difference. The sponsor way, it doesn't really seem to make too much of a difference as to the messaging, but they're more being relied on their trust that they have built with their executive decision maker. So it's really about the relationship that your sponsor has with them. But this helps because there's another thing that they tested, which is called the known business initiative, and ROI. This is where you demonstrate that you've done your homework, you understand what their challenges and priorities are that they're trying to address. And then you share some kind of a quantified ROI of the results that other companies like yours have offered. We've been using this for a while, right? With limited impact, though. The other thing that's important about this is you have to share some kind of an estimated impact that this is going to have on your executive's business and their company. It's widely used, except that it actually resulted in a 9 to 12% drop in how credible vendors appeared, how confident they were that that vendor could help, and therefore their likelihood of taking a meeting, again, through a direct channel. The reason that these 2 approaches were not as effective is because of what scientists called preference stability. We just don't like to change our minds once we've made up our minds. In fact, we tend to filter out and discount information that counters the opinion that we've already made up our minds about. So once a buyer has actually acknowledged a problem, they pretty quickly decide on how they're going to solve it. In order for us to change this dynamic, though, we need to be able to offer something that they don't know, new information or new insight that either is going to change how they think about the problem or changes the ranges of options that they feel is available to them to solve the problem. We have to add more value than Google can. To do this, try approaches that introduce a new need that they haven't considered before based on your experience with other customers who have done things like this, an unconsidered need that they maybe encountered as a result of going through the process. This might be a problem or a missed opportunity that your executive doesn't know that they have or doesn't fully appreciate that they might have. But knowing that someone else like them has gone through it and discovered this, that can add value because it's something they didn't know before. And finally, the last one is the competitive benchmark offer. This is where they tested the sellers offering benchmark information compared to the prospective executives' other similar companies, their competitors. Now, ideally, this includes data about the company that you've developed with existing customers in industries like theirs. This gives executives a chance to see how they stack up against the competition, against key performance indicators. We do something like this when we are evaluating sales teams. And if you check out the link below, you can actually compare the mindsets and skill sets of your sales teams to others in your industry or other competitors and see how your competitors' salespeople are beating your salespeople. But when you do that, what you're doing is you're presenting an issue that was sourced from an external trend, and factors, and you're introducing to them unknown problems or challenges or things they might be missing out on that either, again, they didn't appreciate before or didn't even know about. What it's doing is it helps to get them to see the things that they don't know. It creates a flaw in their perception of what they've already decided on. It's how we challenge their thinking. But you can't stop there. You also have to make sure that you share some kind of a case study or a story that demonstrates specifically how you can help with whatever problem that you've uncovered. So don't bring up a problem if you don't have a solution for it. But you also have to quantify the impact that that's going to make. Now, the best way that I find to do this is to actually do a ballpark preliminary calculation with your champion to discover what kind of impact that this could have on revenue and cost savings and operating margins. And that becomes the business case that you can share with executives along with the insights. So not only are you sharing that here's something that you might not be aware of that could be costing you X, here's how others like you have solved it, and here's what you might be saving or gaining as a result. This is why it is so important to slow down, to do your research into your buyer's industry and current trends, and whatever else it is that you can do to immerse yourself in their world. You've got to add more value to the conversation than their Google searches do. This is the opportunity to truly help your champion, to give them the confidence to make the introduction to their boss. Because when you start making them look good to their boss, they're more likely to want to have that conversation with you and their boss. This is how you're going to get executive decision makers involved without ticking off your champion. First, by establishing where in the process it needs to happen and what is going to be important in that. You're building a business case with them. This is how you can add value to the buying experience. Test it out. Let me know how it works. And if you liked this video, please share it with your team, your colleagues, and subscribe or follow me here on this channel to get the next science-based sales tips and other science-based sales techniques that I research and test out. If you want to get this before anybody else in the world and you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you go to the website with the links below and in the comments to subscribe to our monthly newsletter because you'll be the first to get it. I love hearing from all of you as far as how you're applying this and what are some of the other things that you're struggling with that I can dig into some research for. So keep sharing those with me, comment with those things, and until next time, you keep learning out there, you keep sharing out there, and together we're going to change the perception and unpredictability of sales.